Alright, I know it's been about 3 months since I've released a video, and I know a lot of you are very frustrated with my lack of commitment. But the truth is that I've stopped playing Napoleon Total War for months now. I've also been very busy at university lately, and I've found it very difficult to make time for videos. I realized that what takes me so much time making these tactics videos is the filming itself. Trying to get people to help me demonstrate what I'm saying and filming relevant shots is very time consuming, and what you see on the screen doesn't always correspond very well with the commentary. I also found that most of the filming I'm doing for tactics videos are just shots of scenery and infantry marching around. There really is no point in most of the stuff you see. The knowledge is all in what you hear. So what I've decided to do is switch from making tactics videos to tactics podcasts. I've given this a lot of thought and I don't know how people are going to respond to this, but this is the only way I'm going to be able to release anything and finish this tactics series before Shogun comes out. Now I want this whole tactics series to be an interactive sort of thing. I know quite a few of my viewers actually have channels of their own and enjoy making Total War videos. What I would like you to do to help me and everyone else who is interested in learning more about this game is to make videos of your own that demonstrate what I'm going to say in these podcasts and post them as video responses. If you can make drawings and schematics and put them into a video, then great. If you feel like putting in the time and effort to film game footage to demonstrate the tactics I talk about, that would be awesome too. You can even upload an extract from a movie if you feel that it is relevant to some of the stuff I'm saying. You don't have to have any sort of commentary in a video response. I mean, you can if you want to. Just make sure you post it as a video response and put a suitable title to it so that you can help make things a little more clear for people. This is my second video in my multiplayer tactics series, and for those of you who have missed the first one, here's a link to it up on the screen. Again, I'd like to remind everyone that I'm going over all the very basics first so that the newcomers to the Total War series, who in my opinion need these videos more than anyone else, can also benefit from them. Once I get all the basics out of the way, I'll start talking about some of the more advanced tactics. In my last video, I went over the very basic composition of a multiplayer army and also talked a little about the different unit types that make up an army and their roles in a battle. In this video, I'm going to go over the fundamentals of attacking an enemy army. Remember, these tutorials are going to be focused on aggressive play. I strongly encourage people who are leaning more towards defense and playing conservatively to start playing aggressively. Defense in this game generally translates to camping. Not always, but generally. I mean, you're not camping if you rush to a hill in the center of the map and hold it. Camping is when you don't move at all from your deployment zone when the battle starts. This is looked upon as a very lame thing to do, and it is seen as the mark of a weak player. Campers usually camp because they don't know how to attack an enemy efficiently. If you're new to this game, you shouldn't use that as an excuse to camp. Playing aggressively is the best way to help you improve. Not only does attacking make for more exciting battles, but it greatly improves your micromanagement. Micromanagement, or micro for short, refers to the act of giving orders and moving your units around on the battlefield. If you have good micro, it means you can order around your troops quickly and efficiently. If your micromanagement is bad, and this will be the case with most new players, you are very slow to respond to what is happening on the battlefield, and you cannot react to any of your enemy's moves in a timely fashion. The only way to improve your micro is to practice. If you keep playing aggressively in multiplayer games online, I guarantee you that your micro will improve. This is a game of micro and tactics, and the better your micro, the better you are at this game. You can be the greatest tactician out there, but if you can't click your mouse fast enough and move your units around good enough, you will suffer online. Poor micro leads to making mistakes in the heat of battle, and a good player will punish you for these mistakes, and more often than not, you will panic. And when you panic, your opponent will quickly gain the upper hand. There are 3 very basic maneuvers that are used to approach an enemy army, and they are the direct frontal assault, flanking, and envelopment. Every other aggressive maneuver is more or less a variation of one of these 3 methods of attack. First, let's take a look at the direct frontal assault. In this maneuver, the attacking army simply moves in a straight line towards the enemy's battle line and comes face to face with it. The success of this maneuver almost completely relies on superior firepower. If you can outgun your enemy easily, then this is a good maneuver to employ. But more often than not, this is not the case, because in multiplayer, everyone starts out with the same amount of funds, and the composition of your army is likely to be very similar to the composition of your opponent's army. This means that the person who gets the first shots in a direct frontal assault will often have an advantage. This is why the direct frontal assault usually fails online, especially when you head straight towards the enemy's center. One variation of this maneuver is what I like to call flank overload. This is when you carry out a direct frontal assault, but rather than attacking along the full length of the enemy's battle line, you focus on overwhelming one flank with a lot of force. But this is for another tutorial. So to summarize, the direct frontal assault is usually a good idea when you simply have more firepower. It's that simple. But the fact that you will most likely not have superior firepower makes it a very risky tactic, because the chances are the player that gets the first volley or two is going to have the upper hand, and when you initiate a direct frontal assault, you will always be on the receiving end of the first volley if your enemy's army is static. So why am I talking about this if it's a maneuver that usually results in disaster? I'm explaining this because this is the prerequisite to some finer maneuvers that do actually work in multiplayer. Just bear with me, these are only the basics. The next maneuver I want to talk about is probably the most important in warfare, and that is the flanking maneuver. The word flank refers to the far edge of an army in a field. An army consists of a right flank, a center, and a left flank. When you flank an enemy, you are attacking the side of their army along its longest axis. What does that mean? It means that you are firing on them from the side while they are facing forwards and not returning fire. When this happens, the enemy is said to be enfiladed. They are under enfilading fire, which is more commonly known as flanking fire. When you are attacking an enemy, you should always look for opportunities to lay down flanking fire on them. The reasons are pretty obvious. If you can fire on an enemy and they can't fire back at you, then you're obviously going to be at an advantage. The flanking maneuver consists of two steps. Step 1, pinning down the enemy from the front using what is called a base of fire. A base of fire is a section of your battle line that lays down fire on the enemy from the front. And step 2, moving a detachment from your army known as the flanking force to swing around the side of the enemy that is pinned down from the front to lay down flanking fire. However, this is flanking in its simplest form. You rarely see this kind of flanking in multiplayer, mainly because players will simply fold their flank that is being enfiladed, or more often simply retreat. What I mean by fold is that they pull the unit that is being flanked so that it is facing both the enemy flanking force and the base of fire, so they can now return fire on both, and this can usually give them enough time to support that flank with other units. Flanking doesn't necessarily have to be with infantry units. You can flank an enemy with cavalry and artillery as well. In summary, flanking is something you should always be trying to do to your enemy. However, keep in mind that flanking is easily countered and can often lead to you losing more troops than your enemy if you can't pull it off in a timely fashion. Again, this is a very big topic, and I'll come back to this in a lot more detail in other tutorials. There are a lot of variations of flanking, and it is often very useful later in a battle when armies are depleted, and you will often find yourself having a specific advantage over your enemy. For example, you may have more cavalry or more skirmishers, and you can then use that to your advantage to try and develop a scheme to flank the enemy. The last maneuver I want to talk about in this tutorial is envelopment, which is also known as encirclement. This is a maneuver where you form a semicircle around your enemy's army and effectively surround it. When you successfully encircle your enemy, you are also laying down fire on both of his flanks simultaneously. This is only something you should try to do when you are confident that you have the upper hand in a battle and you are simply mopping up the remnants of the enemy army. If you try to envelop an enemy early in a battle, you spread out your men way too much. A good player will then easily focus on one part of your spread out force and will easily take it out. If this happens, you can find yourself in big trouble very fast. If you take a look at my 6th commentary battle, you will see the perfect example of encirclement gone wrong. My enemy tried to completely surround me, and that left his center extremely weak. I managed to destroy his center and form a wedge between his two flanks. This effectively separated his army into 2 fragments, which eventually led to him losing. However, envelopment can work if you manage to out-micro your opponent. If your opponent fails to push aggressively on one segment of your enveloping army and fails to prevent you from constantly flanking his left and right wings, you can easily beat them. But against a competent player, it rarely works, so I would only recommend envelopment when you are simply mopping up. Last but not least, I'd like to give some pointers to those of you who have never played or don't usually play this game online. Rule number 1 in multiplayer: do not ever quit. There will be times when defeat is inevitable, but that doesn't give you an excuse to leave the game. When you do that, you are denying your opponent the chance to look at the battle stats and save the battle replay. This is extremely frustrating, so please don't do it. When a game begins, a decent player will wish you good luck, and this can be abbreviated as GLHF, which stands for good luck, have fun. When the battle ends, most people will say something like good game, or GG for short. And for those of you who like people to join your campaign drop-in battles, you should always inform your opponent of the composition of your army. That is only fair because you get to see what units your opponent has under his command beforehand, but he does not get to see what you have. Just keep in mind that nobody appreciates cheaters in bad sports. Play fair. It makes the game much more fun. I hope some people found all this material useful, and I'm really looking forward to the feedback on this podcast, and hopefully we can get some good video responses that will help make everything a little more clear. Otherwise, please leave your comments and thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe if you already haven't.